Okay, over to Angel when she's ready. Let the attendees come in and then they can start.
All
Okay.
right. Let me take off all of these things that I don't need.
So we're seeing everyone coming in and we're excited. The numbers are going up. We're at 12 now. We're supposed to have a couple of our NUSTI executive members. I'm looking for Soraya Estrada. I'm not seeing her name on the list here. She's supposed to be responsible for our opening prayer. Yes, we are live and we are glad to see so many attendees coming in. Please send the word to all of your fellow classmates. Let them know we are live and alive. We're having our natural science session at this time. So if you're not seeing your friend from parasitology, call them up. If you're not seeing your friend from preliminary biology, let them know we are here. All right, we're up to 17. Soraya, if you are here, please let me know so that I can have you spotlighted. I see you. Yes, good evening, Soraya. Welcome. Good evening, Ms. Thomas. Glad to see that you are here. All right, Soraya, I am still not seeing you for some reason. Okay, there you are. All right. So it is now 2:02 p.m. I want to welcome all of our students who have taken the time to join us for our session today. This is Business and Career Week 2022, and we are learning all about digitalization, and its role in the careers that you are thinking about for the future. So before we go any further, I would like to call on Soraya Estrada to pray for us at this time. Soraya?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
So we're going to open in prayer for those on our and Lord. Dear Heavenly Father, we come before you at this time, dear Father, giving you thanks for life, for health, and strength, O God. Father, we thank you for the opportunity for us to have gathered here, O God. I pray and I thank you for all the organizers of this program, dear God. Thank you for their time, for their patience, for their effort, dear Father. I pray for all the presenters who are going to share knowledge with us at this time, dear Father, that you give them clarity of speech, dear Father, that you give them a peace of mind, O God, so that they can deliver this information to us in ways that we can understand, to remember, to retain, O God, so we can use it whenever necessary in our lives, dear Father. Dear God, I have said if there is any hindrance before us throughout this program, O God, that you would remove it. Any internet difficulties, technical difficulties, oh God, I pray that you remove it so that we would have a successful program, oh God. I pray for a smooth program there, Father. Thank you for all of us who are joined here today. I pray that all those who are on their way, guide them, oh God. And may we have a productive and successful, effective program, dear Father. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Soraya. For those of us just joining, we are at the natural science session of the Business and Career Week. And so we are featuring at this time special item of music from one of our alumni, Renee Lawrence. So sit back and enjoy this special song.
I've walked among the shadows, you wiped my tears away. I've felt the pain of heartbreak, I've seen the brighter days. I've prayed prayers to heaven from my lowest place. I have held your blessings, God, you give and take away. And no matter what I have, your grace is enough. And no matter where I am, I'm standing in your love. On the mountains I will bow my life to the one who set me there. In the valley I will lift my eyes to the one who sees me there. When I'm standing on the mountains, I didn't get there on my own. When I'm walking through the valley, I know I am not alone. You're God of the hills and valleys, the hills and valleys, God of the hills and valleys, and I am not alone. I've watched my dreams get broken. In you I hope again. No matter what, I know I'm safe inside your hands. On the mountains I will bow my life to the one who set me there. In the valleys I will lift my eyes to the one who sees me there. When I'm standing on the mountains, I didn't get there on my own. When I'm walking through the valley, I know I am not alone. You're God of the hills and valleys, the hills and valleys, God of the hills and valleys, and I am not alone. Father, you give and take away every joy and every pain. Through it all, you will remain over and over. Father, you give and take away every joy and every pain. Through it all, you will remain over and over. On the mountains, I will bow my life. In the valleys, I would lift my eyes. On the mountains, I will bow my life to the one who set me there. In the valleys, I will lift my eyes to the one who sees me there. When I'm standing on the mountains, I didn't get there on my own. When I'm walking through the valley, I know I am not alone. You're God of the hills and valleys, the hills and valleys, God of the hills and valleys, and I am not alone. You're God of the hills, you're God of the valleys, you're God of the hills, and I am not alone. No, I'm not alone. No, I'm not alone, and I am not alone.
That was Renee Lawrence, one of our recent graduates from the biology program. At this time, we will hear from Dr. Camille Mitchell, our dear chair of the Department of Biological Sciences. Dr. Mitchell, over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. The pleasure is mine this afternoon to bring a few words to you from our Dean, Dr. Emmanuel Antwi, who was unable to be with us at this time. I want to welcome you here. It is a pleasure being with you. I am excited to hear our presenters. I can guarantee that you are going to have a very informative afternoon with them. You are going to learn things that you've never heard before. And when you leave here, you will be excited to go and get your careers in the field of digitalization. So As we continue on, I would just want to thank Dr. Farrell and Dr. Cassie for agreeing. And I want to pass you back over to Dr. Roberts, who will continue with this afternoon's proceedings. Welcome to each and every one of you.
Thank you, Dr. Mitchell. And again, thank you to everyone who is present. I see we have 41 attendees, so that's very exciting. At this time, I want to introduce to you Alvin Farrell, who will be our first presenter. Alvin Farrell completed his undergraduate education at USC through the Andrews University affiliated program. He did a Bachelor of Science degree at the time, double majoring in biology and computing. And if that wasn't enough, he also did a minor in math. After completing his undergraduate program, he pursued a Master of Science degree in biochemistry, which he did out in Loma Linda, California at Loma Linda University. Then he went on to complete his PhD in bioinformatics and computational biology at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. From there, he worked as a postdoctoral research fellow at the National Institutes of Health, where he served in the Laboratory of Molecular Immunology. Are you guys hearing all of these different ologies? Well, okay, so biochemistry is not quite an ology, but there was biochemistry. Then he went on to bioinformatics, computational biology, and then molecular immunology. So in the pursuit of those 3 degrees, he has covered a lot of the same topics that you guys would be doing in your undergrad program, many of you doing immunology, biochemistry, but not the bioinformatics. But if Dr. Farrell has anything to say about that, that will be something that we'll have coming on stream soon. Right, Dr. Mitchell? Dr. Farrell now serves as a supervisory bioinformatics scientist at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, where he's involved in multiple research projects, and he leads the Center for Childhood Cancer Research Bioinformatics team in the Division of Oncology and the Department of Biomedical and Health Informatics. As a Caribbean national and an alumnus of the biology program here at USC, we are very proud to have him represent us in the US scientific community, and we are quite thrilled that he has accepted our invitation to share with all of us, especially our students today. So without further ado, I welcome Dr. Farrell to the stage. Dr. Farrell, please take it away.
Thank you so much, Dr. Roberts. I'm going to attempt to share my screen again.
Sure.
Awesome. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes, we can.
So thank you so much to the organizers, Dr. Mitchell, Dr. Roberts, Clarine, who reached out to me earlier. I love the opportunity to come back and talk to all the students. I have my own agenda. You know, I'm trying to spread this bioinformatics agenda around the world, especially in the Caribbean, and more on that later. But I am honored to talk to everyone who's here. I'm very appreciative of the students who came. And I'm hoping that you can at least grab one thing of interest to take home and Google later, then it's a win. So today I'm going to talk about bioinformatics and computational biology and try to convince you that it's not the future, but it's actually the present gateway to research. And I'm going to try to discuss a few points. I'm going to just briefly go over a few fields of research. I'm assuming most of you are biology majors or related to the field. And then I'm going to dive into what is bioinformatics and computational biology and share a few of the careers, the possible careers it can pursue, as well as give a real life application of bioinformatics so you kind of understand exactly what a bioinformatician does. And then we'll just look at the field and see what jobs are actually out there today and see what other educational opportunities are out there if it's something anybody wants to explore on pursuing. Well, this journey starts like many years ago, a million years ago, when I just graduated from high school. I was in St. Vincent at the time. For those who don't know, I was born in St. Vincent and the Grenadines and moved back and forth between St. Vincent and St. Lucia. And when I decided I wanted to do a degree in biology, I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do with it. And if you come from, at least when I grew up, when I came from those communities, the options were, well, maybe you'll be a doctor, a dentist, a teacher, or just be someone in the lab and do stuff. And I was like, you know what, I could live with that, but I know I'm not, I didn't think I was suitable to be a medical doctor at that time. So my options kind of swayed towards dentist, teacher, and someone in a lab. But then I started to explore more of the fields of research, and that's what we're gonna jump in now. And I'm not sure what the protocol is, but if there's any questions, I think Dr. Roberts is gonna monitor those, and at each section, feel free to let me know if there's questions, or we can wait till afterwards and take the questions. But when I explored the different fields of research, if you're a bio major, there's actually a lot more options than I knew at that time. And I know we all know about the healthcare option, like you could be a doctor, a doctor, a nurse, you know, a physician's assistant, someone who is vital to the hospital. But then there's also microbiology. If you enjoy looking at bacteria and microbes in the environment or in the gut, trying to understand their ecosystem. Or someone in the lab, as I mentioned, a biological technician who can assist with research in labs in an academic environment, like in a university, in a hospital, or in a pharmaceutical company. Or if you are obsessed with genetics, you could be a genetic counselor. And what this person actually does is, with their breadth of knowledge of genetics, if someone comes in with a problem or disease and they're not sure how to make a decision, the genetic counselor can help them, talk to them with the science and guide them as to what's the proper decision given their genetic background. For me, I went the route of research scientist, and that is somebody who is extremely curious and wants to ask and answer as many questions as possible with whatever their toolkit is at that time. So someone who is a chemist and they love doing chemistry experiments, that could be their toolkit. For me, my toolkit was computer programming, and I wanted to use that to address scientific questions. And we'll dive more on that later. And I'm sure some of you or all of you have seen shows like NCI, where there's a crime scene and people want to figure out what's going on. And there's forensic scientists who, that's the whole career. Like, can we deconvolute what happened here by all the evidence and take this to a lab and figure out what's going on? Then there's health communications, and these professionals, their main purpose is just to educate the public. Like, they would have worked in the field for a long time, and they would have vast knowledge of different, whether it's virology, especially coming out of COVID, or just healthcare systems in general. And there's a lot of misinformation out there. And what they would do is they would interpret what the scientists say in a way that politicians, the vast public, schools, you know, anyone can understand, and that's their career. And I'm sure everybody here is very familiar with environmental scientists, who are very, very focused on not only how we can preserve the ecosystem and understand it, but how can we use it to benefit our lives better. And of course, the route of education, which is the most valuable in my opinion, of training the next generation of scientists, whether it's being a biology teacher on the secondary school level or professor at the university level. And of course, a specialist writer, who is someone who his whole focus or her whole focus is transferring data into information that is easily readable to whoever that given audience is, whether it is a layman or somebody who is well-versed in scientific lingo. But for the rest of this presentation, I want to dive into the research scientist route. And even within research science, there's a lot of interdisciplinary work here. A lot of the fields actually interact with each other. So agricultural research is interaction with environmental research. Forensic research is interaction with biomedical and industrial research. But for our sake, let's just go a little deeper into biomedical research. And now we're looking at ways that we can apply science, in this case, I'm trying to convince it bioinformatics is good, into answering questions in these fields that can eventually help us improve human life. So there's two things we have to understand. You have to use this to understand human life, and then how can we use this to improve it? And these are the very popular fields today, biochemistry and biophysics, which you are all familiar with, cancer biology, which is one of my domains, cell biology, which you were talking about all the mechanisms that make a cell function, computational biology, and that's almost interchangeable with bioinformatics, which is using computational tools to understand the body or diseases and help make predictions on how we can go from diagnosis to actually helping a patient. Genetics in understanding why are we here? How do we come here? How did we inherit our genes? How are they actually translated? And very practical aspects of human disease and immunology, understanding how these diseases are formed and how we can equip our immune system to actually help cure these diseases. And microbiology, which you mentioned earlier, understanding bacteria and stem cell and developmental biology, understanding development from stem cells through all the different organs that we have that make life functional. So I hope that was enough to let you know that there's many fields that you can delve into in the natural sciences, much more than the four I thought when I graduated high school and started my college career. But for now, I'm going to dive a little bit into bioinformatics and computational biology. And when I brought this topic up to some of my teachers and even to my friends, when I told them I want to do bioinformatics, they would say, bioinfo what? What is that? Why are you making up words? And I realized there's not many people who actually know what this is. And I think the only reason I knew was because at the time, I was studying biology and computer science, and I wanted a field that would combine the two because I enjoyed computer programming, but I love thinking about science. Now, while it's often said that these two terms are interchangeable, there's actually a slight difference. But if you have the skill set for one, you can most likely do the other. And the major difference between bioinformatics and computational biology is that bioinformatics is simply a multidisciplinary field that combines the biological knowledge with computer programming and large sets of big data. So they're more concerned of getting all this big data and pretty much organizing it in a way that is interpretable or it's actual information that someone could use. Whereas computational biology, this is a multidisciplinary field that uses computer science, statistics, and math to solve problems. So as a scientist, if there's a specific problem I want to solve, I'm going to use my programming skills, my knowledge of statistics and math, and I'm going to address it theoretically and try to come up with a solution versus always trying to organize large groups of data and presenting it in a way that is usable to other scientists. So that's a stark difference. But usually they work very well hand in hand. And just to take one step back, these are both like subgroups or subtypes of data science. And in the digital era where we live right now, data science runs so many things. And you may ask yourself, well, you know, what is data science? And it's a general term, but simply speaking, it's pretty much a field that unifies statistics, data analysis, informatics, and whatever that related field is, so that we can actually understand or model and analyze the phenomenon that happens within that field with that data. And it's widely used. I'm sure you guys know this, but it's very well used in social media. People track patterns, try to understand your personality by how you deal with like Facebook and Instagram or your Google searches. Is used in automation, which is a very good thing, in terms of like Tesla developing cars that can drive by themselves, or aircrafts or drones. They can follow the trends and say, hey, something's wrong, and make good decisions. It's used in marketing a lot and in finance. It's used in credit and insurance. If you want to see if you should give somebody a loan or if you should give someone insurance, they'll do the fraud and risk detection and run there, and based on the data they have received, make a decision or help make a decision. It helps predict sales and, of course, help predict when's a good time to travel, and that affects pricing. But what we're very interested in is how we can use data science in healthcare to help us predict what is the best possible outcome for a patient given their past treatment, their genetic history, and the current disease. So there's a lot of applications for data science, but the key thing is that data science combines statistics, computer science, and whatever that domain knowledge is. Within bioinformatics, that domain knowledge is biology. So in essence, if there's anything that I want to stick with you, just remember bioinformatics is this combination of data science applied to biology with computer science and statistics. But it's never that simple. It really is never that simple. It's a tad bit more complicated. And along with statistics, biology, and computer science, as I will show you in a little bit, there's a little bit of chemistry, some engineering, some biochemistry, and some math that will help make you a very versatile computational biologist. And I hope I was able to shed some light on what bioinformatics is. I'm going to pause for a quick second to see if there's any questions. Otherwise, we will just jump into careers. And I'll count it.
So Alvin, we're going to take all of the questions at the end. So feel free to continue.
Awesome, thank you. So let's talk about some careers in biomedical research that bioinformatics can be applied to. And generally speaking, there's more than this, but generally speaking, in biomedical research, we talk about 3 different arenas. The academic arena, so that's whether you want to work in a university setting, in academia, industry, which is where we're talking about like the pharmaceutical companies, drug design, stuff along those lines, and clinical, and that's in the healthcare system, in hospitals, research hospitals, and so on. And within academia, there's a few roles that you could fill. A lot of people, they gun for that professor role where you're expected to have a terminal degree, a PhD of some sorts, and their role is to run a research lab. They will run multiple projects, and some, depending on your level, likely you'll be required to teach university courses, but there are some professors who do purely research, and they will continually to apply for grants to keep the lab funding. But very importantly, they will continue to train students and postdocs, which is the next generation of scientists. And they will address questions of their own personal interest once they get funding for it, as well as urgent questions in their field of study. And typically with bioinformatics, you will collaborate with another professor, whether it's in oncology or environmental science or biophysics, and you leverage their expertise to have some more meaningful research. And then another level is the in academia is the postdoctoral fellow. And this is somebody who would have just graduated with their PhD. And it's a transitional position where, you know, you graduate from your PhD, you're not exactly sure what you want to do, or you still need a little bit more training. And this helps you focus into an area of research that you want to learn long-term, or helps you decide if I want to be in the industry, in the academics, or in the clinical world. And as part of their role, they will train junior scientists and students as well, but they will try to perform independent research within the lab of a professor or a pharmaceutical group, because this could be in academia and also in industry. And then we have the staff scientists, and they are less focused on independent research. They are focused on performing collaborative research. And this is actually a long-term position. And typically you'll have someone with a master's of science or PhD who would be a staff scientist within an academic environment. Now, if we switch over to the industry, and in this case, we'll lean towards the pharmaceutical industry, you'll have the scientists who their focus is to analyze a lot of data. The educational background is typically an MA, PhD or a master's degree. And they're trying to help discover new patterns in data and understand a disease so they can find out the best way to treat it or develop a new therapeutic approach or drug for that disease. And they will work in a huge collaborative environment with other scientists to come up with that conclusion. So they're answering the questions, whereas you can have a bioinformatics engineer And more than not, the engineers, you would have a master's, they don't necessarily need a PhD. Most of them do not have a PhD because a PhD trains you to answer theoretical questions, whereas with a master's, most masters in bioinformatics are geared towards the programming aspect of it. How do we design these algorithms? And that's what their role is. They are going to develop these company-wide programs, databases, servers, and help make sure that research flows smoothly. And in rare cases, you'll have the analyst, and the analyst, usually it's a undergrad with a bioinformatics experience, and they'll do basic analyses under the supervision of a senior scientist and help get different tasks done. Now, if we go over to the clinical world, things are very similar, but slightly different. And here, I just highlighted a few, but there's more. There are a few fields within a research hospital setting that one could pursue. And typically in, for example, the field of oncology, you'll need an MD or a PhD, or in some cases, people pursue an MD, PhD, they have both degrees. And they focus on analyzing cancer genomes to discover new therapeutic targets, especially for cases of cancer that are very hard to treat. And they design these new therapies or work with, surprise, surprise, pharmaceutical companies to help come up with solutions to solve a very difficult case of cancer. Now within pathology, similar, you'll need an MD or PhD or both, well, one is usually enough. And you'll analyze patients' DNA and RNA, and you're trying to determine what actually caused this disease. And this is very similar to diagnostics, where right now, a lot of hospitals have this whole department of genomic diagnostics, where they also analyze DNA and RNA to determine what disease this patient has, because sometimes it's not so clear. Usually what will happen is there'll be a biopsy of a disease, they'll send it to pathology, they'll look through it with a microscope, and if the pathologist can't really understand what's going on, they'll send it to diagnostics, and they'll try, and then genomic diagnostics will be run on it to figure out what disease it is. Now, outside of these, which are very intensive in terms of like scientific research, there are other applications. For example, healthcare systems or health systems, where typically it's good to have an MD or a PhD, but the MS works just fine. And this field is about basically designing systems to curate the clinical data, because in many hospitals, if this isn't in place, it's very hard to track all of the patient data, especially when you have so many doctors from different backgrounds. They write notes in their style. It's very important to curate all of this data into a very organized database, so that if for any reason you need to go back to this patient data, is easily accessible by anyone. And that leads right into health informatics. And this is typically done by someone with a master's or a PhD, where they can now use this clinical data to create models and help make decisions in the healthcare system. So those are a few examples of what you can do or the careers you could pursue. And I encourage everyone, if there's anything that stood out to you, jump on Google afterwards and do a little bit more digging and see if anything sounds interesting to you. But I want to give a real application of bioinformatics, because I'm just saying like, oh, it combines biology, statistics, and computer science, but you don't really, at least for me, I don't really understand something until I get my hands wet and do something. So let's walk through a problem, hypothetical, but actually kind of real problem. So I assume all of us, I know all of you know this, but just in case it's one person who doesn't, the central dogma of biology is that, DNA is transcribed into RNA. And if you allow me, sorry, guys. All right, perfect. DNA is transcribed to RNA, and RNA is then translated through proteins, and these proteins go on to perform a function in our cells. And this is absolutely necessary for all of our different cells in our body to function correctly. Now, we have many different internal organs, right? We have hearts, lungs, liver, they all do different things. But we all have to save every single cell supposedly has the same DNA sequence. And the question is, well, if we have so much, if they all have the same DNA, then how do we get like a heart and lungs and a liver and a stomach? Like, you know, how does this work? So if we have a hypothetical DNA sequence, right? There are different chunks of the DNA or different genes, let's call them genes because that's what they are, that are only expressed in certain organs, and they allow that organ to be that organ. They allow that cell to act like a heart cell or myocyte in the muscle or in the lungs. So we need to, as a bioinformatician, we need to be able to like understand the DNA, but not only that, but look at a cell and figure out what's being expressed in it. So if we look at a heart, you know, there are only these genes that are present in the heart, and I just colored them in blue for this picture example. And in the lungs, there are only, you know, genes that are specific to the lungs that are expressed there, and so on for the stomach, the liver, the pancreas, and the diaphragm. And once everything's working fine and everything's in harmony and this RNA is expressed where it's supposed to be, then that's fantastic. And then this RNA is then translated to proteins, and now we only have heart proteins in the heart, lung proteins in the lung, stomach proteins in the stomach, and so on. And that's how healthy humans, you know, in a way, you know, pretty much function. And there's a lot of things in between each of these sets from DNA to RNA that regulate what genes are being expressed. I'm not going to get into that right now, but we can talk. You can ask about it later if you'd like. But the question is now, what happens if we have mutations, right? So if we have a mutation, for example, in this heart gene, now what could possibly happen is where we had two proteins, this mutation caused a problem in the translation and the transcription and the translation. And now we have one whole protein and one protein that doesn't quite look right. And now that this protein is absolutely necessary for the heart to function is not present, now we have a heart problem that we need to fix or, you know, diagnose in some cases. What about hair, where there is a mutation in the promoter region of the stomach gene? So previously where we had two genes for the stomach and that translated to two proteins, now this mutation stopped it, and now there's a protein missing. Now there's a gene and protein missing, and now we have a stomach issue with our stomach. Or what if there's a mutation in this pancreatic gene, and now it's not only being expressed in the pancreas, it's also being expressed in the lungs, and now we have an extra gene, extra protein that's not supposed to be there, just, you know, messing around in the lungs and or in the lung cells, and that can actually cause a problem too. So there's all these things that could happen in our body that a bioinformatician would help figure out. So what this bioinformatician would do is they will like go through the sequence of the DNA and look for the variation that's not supposed to be there. And if there's a variation, they'll say, okay, well, is this variation going to cause a disease or does it not really matter? Then you can also quantify the RNA. So if this represents a gene that's in our body, and these are reads or sequences that are generated on a sequencer in the lab. So what this does is scientists, wet lab scientists would take a sample of DNA or RNA from a cell, and they'll put it in these huge machines and they'll sequence the RNA and DNA, and I'll spit them out into like a file, and we'll read this into our computer and try to quantify or align them to the genome that we have noted. And we're trying to quantify, okay, this is the amount of RNA from this patient for these genes that are present. And then they can figure out if that RNA is what's supposed to be there, if it's too much, or if it's too little. And along with that, looking at the mutation from the DNA, they'll look at see if this mutation actually causes a change in the protein sequence. Because remember, DNA goes to RNA and RNA goes to protein. And if there is a change, for example, this glycine to alanine in the protein, now the question is, well, does that affect the function? Does that change the protein from looking something like this, which is nicely folded, to a slightly different shape, which could affect the function? And there's a whole field of structural biology or structural bioinformatics, which focus on predicting, given a sequence of proteins, what the structure will look like. So given these three areas, now we can apply this strategy for example, to cancer cells. And this is what happens in oncology. And I'm going to give an example of a project we actually worked on for the last couple of years and recently published of ways we can use this to understand a cancer and come up with a new treatment. So there's a lot of stuff going on here, but we're going to walk through it, right? So we just spoke about quantifying RNA and understanding what's being expressed, all using the computational work. So if we take some cells from a cancer patient, this is a cancer called neuroblastoma, which is a childhood cancer of the peripheral nervous system, right? So if we take some of the cancer cells and we compare it to normal tissue, and we take it to the lab, we take that cell to the lab, and we put it into one of those big sequences I told you about, where we can sequence the DNA. And then also, I'm sure you either have or will learn about mass spectrometry in your chemistry classes, but you run it through your mass spec to quantify the protein. Then you can kind of see that, okay, there are genes that are being highly expressed, and what these red dots represent are genes that are higher in the cancer, but lower in the normal tissue. And the blue dots represents genes that are lower in the cancer, but higher in the normal tissue. And this is what bioinformaticians will do. They'll try to figure out, okay, if this is baseline, what are overexpressed in the cancer and what is underexpressed in the cancer? And how can we use this to help figure out how to treat the patient? So in our case, what we wanted to see was a gene that was very expressed in the cancer, in this case, neuroblastoma, using our technology, but not expressed in any other tissue. And that way, we can design a treatment that will only target this gene and it will affect the cancer, but it wouldn't have any side effects on any other tissue. And this is a huge thing in precision medicine now, because previously, especially with chemotherapy, you would apply a treatment to a cancer, but it also hurts your healthy tissue. And we're trying to get away from that. We want to make sure that our treatment only hits the cancer, but doesn't affect the health of the patient or any of the healthy tissue. So when we identify this gene, this FOX2B gene, that's the name of it, which is essential for the cancer to survive, and it's not present in these tissues, the next thing is, well, how can we target it? And can we model this gene? So if you're interested in biochemistry or biophysics, in bioinformatics, you can actually create models to predict what this will look like, what the gene or a piece of that gene will look like in the immune system. And what's happening here is that this is a part of our immune system, these HLA alleles, which are responsible for like pretty much grabbing the a gene or peptide and showing it to a T cell, so a T cell can figure out if it's supposed to be there or if it's not supposed to be there. So essentially, we all have this protein, but it's slightly different in all of us. And what it does is it grabs this gene, this FOXP that I pointed out, it shows it to a TCR, and if the TCR or if the T cell identifies it, remember a T cell is a white blood cell, which is our immune system, the main fighters in our immune system. If they says, hey, this is not supposed to be here, then it'll destroy the cancer cell. But the gene we found, even though it doesn't appear in normal tissue, it is actually native to the human proteome or the human proteins. So what they did was we partnered up with engineers. And remember I mentioned earlier that it's not just statistics and computer science, but there's a little engineering, a little biochemistry. And they designed this whole new T cell that will specifically target this gene, this FOX2B gene. And that way it can only attack that and get rid of the cancer and do no harm to the patient. So they did preclinical trials and it was very successful. But here's the catch. There's always a catch, right? I mentioned that this HLA, which is important in our immune system, but is different from everybody, in everybody, or between different people. There's only different populations in the world that has this type of HLA, right? This immune system that actually helps binds to this particular gene, right? And what we need to do, or what should be done, is that we should be able to detect or figure out what HLA or what parts of our immune system can we design that would pretty much cover the majority of the world. But unfortunately, we don't have enough sequencing data to do that. If you look at this map, like one of these alleles, one of these genes are only present in some parts of South America, a few parts in the United States, here in China as well, hardly in Africa, nor in Russia. And the other one is pretty much in Russia, or in Europe and the Soviet Union, or not Soviet, Russia, but now in Africa is hardly there. And to be honest, we don't know, because there's not enough sequencing data out there for all these populations, where or what these genes are in those minority populations. And that's one of the reasons why we need to increase our sequencing efforts and do more research within populations of Africa and Southern Asia. My personal preference is Caribbean, but that's because I'm biased. And this would help. But this is just an example of how this is applied in cancer. Now, if we took a similar approach and we looked at the endocrine system on neurons, which Columbia University is doing, this is how they apply this to understand mental illnesses. A similar approach in looking at the RNA and DNA and genes in the immune system helps us to understand the immunology and develop therapeutics. When we do this in sick patients in general, not just cancer patients, now we're looking at clinical diagnostics and pharmaceutical drug design. And when we do this in plants, now we're in the field of agricultural sciences and yield increasing. And this is what a lot of the big food companies are doing right now. And just because I know we all love NCIS, we do this with evidence from a crime scene. Now we're in the field house of forensic sciences using bioinformatics. So there's different applications that we can apply this to, and I don't expect you to all understand or grasp everything all at once, but it's something that, if anything sparks your interest, do a little search and see, can you actually play around with the data? But going back to the people who would actually perform or do this analysis, it comes down to the scientist and the engineer. So remember I mentioned to you that there's a lot of careers that you can pursue, but the two most basic ones in this type of work is the scientist and the engineer. And a scientist would be the bioinformatics scientist would be the one who would write the code or write the programs. They'll search for those new patterns and develop ways of understanding the data. They'll perform the statistical analysis on all these data sets. And then they'll work with the scientists who are actually in the lab doing the actual experiments to help interpret the data. Whereas the engineer will just make sure that all the bioinformatics resources, the programs are working fine, there's enough databases or the portals are working fine and they have access to the data. They'll support the work with the large scale cloud computing, which is the big thing right now. And they will do a lot of software engineering, build web servers, and do a lot of visualizations. So they are much more on the computer science, computer engineering side. And why is all this important? Well, the big thing, and this is what we've been saying for years, is that if you look at all these databases over the years, all of these are databases of DNA sequences, gene sequences, research papers, chemical sequences. There's so much data being generated, so much as we were in like the 200 or 300 of millions of sequences being stored over the last, 30 years. And we just don't have enough data analysts to actually go through this data. There's not enough computational biologists to analyze this data. And that's why there's always a demand. And this is just the raw data. Now, when we talk about including the clinical data, making sure that we're using the same languages when it comes to diseases in the Mondo database, or how we describe the diseases in these other databases used by the National Cancer Institute, or how we are we using the same language in describing the anatomy, the human anatomy, which is a whole nother database. Like all of these clinical annotations plus the actual data needs to be curated and integrated. So there's like huge need for these type of data scientists. And if you go around to like LinkedIn or any of these websites, these career sites, you'll always see like a long list of, surprise, job opportunities. And the question we'll ask now, like, okay, well, what job opportunities are out there? if we look at the United States, for example, I just pull out like from this website 5 different states. There are when I say thousands of jobs available, there are thousands of jobs available in the United States alone. Now, if you look at Europe or the rest of the world, you'll see that there are also thousands of jobs in India, the UK, hundreds in Germany, and throughout Europe, they're scattered, as well as in Africa and Asia. So there's jobs all around the world and many opportunities. And you might be thinking, well, yeah, okay, there's jobs all around the world, but I'm in Trinidad, or I'm in St. Vincent or St. Lucia, and this is sad, but it's actually a good thing. Within the last 2 years, because of the pandemic, a lot of jobs have moved to remote work. So there's actually many postings where they'll say, hey, we have these job opportunities available as a computational biologist, a bioinformatics scientist, and it's a remote job, which basically means you can work from anywhere. They might require you to travel once or twice a year or a few times a quarter for a meeting or so on. Or many times they just meet by Zoom or Skype or some sort. But there's a lot of remote jobs becoming available. And even at, like for example, we hired 2 people who have never met in person. One of my colleagues was in Virginia and recently moved back to India for a few months. And it's absolutely fine because they can get their work done. They can log into the servers and get access to the data. So I'm just saying that there are remote opportunities available, and we think that this would only increase. So it's no longer just a pipe dream. This can actually be a possibility if you're so interested. But then if I did want to pursue a job, how would I do that? And there's different educational routes you can go. We would always say that graduate work is almost like necessary. And if you wanted to pursue a career in bioinformatics or computational biology, it is extremely strongly recommended that you pursue a graduate degree. And there's 3 routes you can go, and arguably a 4th. You can do the master's, you can do a PhD, or if you are on track to do a medical degree, you can also do an MD PhD if you want to. And I'm just going to briefly go through the differences. So with a master's, most of the work you're going to be doing is going to be on the computer science side of bioinformatics, because the key is that you come out with that bioinformatics skill set, which is computer programming, statistical analysis, stuff along those lines. It's usually going to take you around 2 years. If you do it in Europe, it could take you about 1 year. And is a very useful tool, especially if you want to be a bioinformatics engineer. The cons of that, usually you will have to pay for it yourself. It comes out of your own pocket. And if a job, if an employer is looking for employee, they would want you to have extra work experience if you have a master's degree. Now, if you do a PhD, more than likely you're going for a scientist route. And that's because a PhD is getting you to think about problems more theoretically and form projects, come up with a plan, come up with a hypothesis, come up with a way of attacking that hypothesis, summarizing your data, and reporting it in the form of a presentation, a thesis, and a publication. Usually this will take around 4 to 6 years if you do it full time. And most research universities will provide a fellowship, which basically means that they will cover your tuition and give you a stipend as long as you work as a graduate research assistant at the school or a teacher's assistant. So essentially, you go to school for free, or you work for the school and they pay for your tuition and give you enough money to live. And yeah, most research universities will offer that. So if you were to pursue that, just keep an eye out to look for funding out opportunities and make sure they offer a fellowship. And if you wanted to become a physician scientist, you can pursue an MD PhD, which takes about 7 to 8 years. And one of the reasons why many people pursue MD PhDs is because when you do an MD PhD, not only do you get great theoretical knowledge on top of your medical and clinical knowledge, but many schools cover full tuition for your MD and your PhD when you're in that program. So some people are just like, hey, I want to do a medical school, but I don't want to pay for it. I'm going to do an MD PhD program. But luckily, most, they actually want to become physician scientists. And they want to balance the whole care for patients with understanding the disease and coming up with new novel therapies to help treat their patients. And there are, besides bioinformatics, there are MD PhDs in multiple fields, like biochemistry, cancer biology, pharmacology. So this is not limited to bioinformatics and computational biology at all. If it's something that appeals to you, I encourage all of you who would love to be a medical doctor to pursue or just explore, just do some searching and see what other opportunities are around with the MD PhD programs and what schools offer it. So what can prepare me for graduate work in bioinformatics? Like, we're all undergrads, and I know that the programs you're in have changed over the years. But the good thing is that if you do a graduate program in bioinformatics, most likely they would instruct you of the basics, which is the biology and biochemistry. There would be a computer programming class, and there would be a statistics class in the course. If you have a bachelor's degree in biology right now, or you're working towards a bachelor's degree in biology, and you're thinking, you know what, in the future, I think I want to do bioinformatics or computational biology, I would encourage you to do a computer programming course, one or two. Honestly, I did the programs at USC, and I'm sure they'll much better, they'll change right now. But I think the first two programming classes from the computer science department will give you more than enough to give you that great understanding, that the fundamentals of programming, and a statistics course, because it is essential to understand the statistics in bioinformatics. And I would encourage, wherever you can find the opportunity, to get involved in research, whether it's doing a research class, or if there's a professor that who's working on research and you want to work with them, just email and say, hey, I want to volunteer my time. I want research experience, kind of help you with the project, because that goes a long way in terms of, especially in terms of applying to graduate school. When you show that you have research experience, a graduate school is more keen to accept you. So it's not just your grades, but it's also what you bring to that department, because the idea is that you will also work as a graduate research assistant. And also that research experience, whether it's volunteered or not, can also be used as somewhat work experience when you apply for jobs. So what do employers really look for when they're hiring bioinformaticians? And we've been trying to hire bioinformaticians for a while. And the key things we do look for is, as I mentioned, do you have that graduate degree? Because that gives us an indication of what you know theoretically. And we take a look into your work experience, whether it's in the form of published work, or we are part of a group that developed and used an available software package that we can evaluate. And these are the two main things. So if there's something that you really want to pursue, I would encourage you to find out how you can gain work experience, or how can I get into a graduate program and learn more about this field? Because as I mentioned, there are many jobs available. There's a lot of data to be analyzed. And even if there's just an idea that you have and you want to pursue, there's so much publicly available data that you can just go online, pull down data and just start working on it. Of course, you'll have to learn the basics, and there's many tools, and I'm sure people are available to help you out with that. So in summary, I hope at least 5 of you got at least one thing from this presentation, is that I hope you leave knowing that what bioinformatics is, and that it's a discipline that integrates biology, computer science, and statistics. I want you to know that there are many applications of bioinformatics in biomedical research, both in the pharmaceutical, academic, and clinical areas of work. There's a lot of publicly available data sets that you can get your hands on. You can access the database and analyze. And there are many bioinformatics jobs around the world. Whether you would love to explore another country, or even try your hand at remote work, these opportunities are available. And there are graduate degrees and work experience are absolutely essential. So if it's something you want to do in the future, the best thing I can recommend is you start working now towards a graduate work, in terms of making sure you have good grades to get into graduate school, start getting some research experience, do the right courses that can prepare you so that when you get to graduate school, it won't be a harsh transition. And it's an investment in your future. And I encourage all of you to, chase your dream. And if this is something you're interested in, go after it. So I would love to leave you with a quote, one of my favorite quotes from Martin Luther King. And it's simply this, that life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? And with that, I will say thank you. And if there are any questions, I am more than happy to address them. If anybody's still awake.
Thank you. We're all still awake. Thank you so much for a very comprehensive presentation, Dr. Farrell. And there are 5 questions in the chat. Some of them you have touched on in your presentation, but I will go through them so that we can get them answered. The first question says, in your opinion, Dr. Farrell, which universities would you recommend that we students look into if we decide to pursue further studies in bioinformatics, since this may be new to many of us and we wouldn't know where to start looking?
So there's quite a few. Full transparency, you can start with your top tier universities like the University of Pennsylvania, Harvard, MITs, but those are extremely competitive schools to get into. You can look for me, like I went to UNC Charlotte, and they have a very good research program, and they take in a lot of international students. And a lot of the schools in Southern California, and also in the Pennsylvania area, there's Temple University that has this program as well, and there's the tuitions covered, as well as Drexel. The key thing I would say is, I can list them off and you'll think to yourself, what are all these universities? The key thing is to go and Google basically bioinformatics PhD programs, and also look at, make sure they have funding opportunities, and they will list out a lot of them. And when you do a PhD program, yes, it's about the program, but it's also about making sure that the program fits your needs. And there will be different research labs in each program. So I encourage you to when you Google that, look at their different research labs and see if any of the research topics actually talk to you. Because you might find an amazing university, but you're just not interested in the work. And you might find a university that's it's okay, but you're actually passionate about the work. And if you're passionate about the work, that can slingshot your career. So I hope I answered your question somewhat. That's okay.
I think so. So there are some related questions. A lot of the questions are surrounding the career path, of course.
Yeah.
So the next question, I think they're kind of related. So how do you suggest one goes about getting into the field of bioinformatics, especially after completing a biochem BSc?
So what I would suggest is start playing around with learning a programming language. If you have a biochem bachelor's, that means you have a pretty good understanding of the biological mechanisms in the body. So the application wouldn't be hard. The toolkit is what you should focus on. So I would suggest start playing around with some introduction to programming courses, and you can get those online. And there's a lot of tutorials online, as well as finding a friend to teach you. But then start looking at programs, whether it's a master's or PhD, see what their requirements are, and try to get those requirements and apply. You don't have the option unless you apply. And once you apply, that can start your career. Before doing that, what I would also do is just go online and read some profiles of different jobs out there and see that if the work interests you. But definitely getting a grasp of computer programming and a little bit of statistics, that will make that transition into the bioinformatics world a little bit easier. And the reason I say that is that when I started my program, a lot of students who came from a purely biology or biochemistry background with no programming experience, they struggled that first year in that programming class, and it took a lot of their time. But once you got over that hump, it was fine. But I think that would be my suggestion.
So you have effectively answered the second question, which was, well, the second question from Fatima, which is about how heavily you need to get into computing. A couple of other questions where we've only got 5 minutes before the next session, so we'll try to get them in.
Okay.
Are there a lot of scholarship and internship opportunities in these fields now?
So yes, the answer is yes, and that's because when you do a PhD, a fellowship is pretty much a scholarship, but they'll pay for you to go to school, and most of the schools offer fellowships. It's just, you would have to work as a research assistant, but the work you do is going towards your thesis anyways. So it's not like you're working extra, you're working for your degree and they're paying you. So I would say yes. And in terms of internships, there are actually quite a few here at least. And before the pandemic, we used to take in quite a few international students, but because of the pandemic, that policy has changed with different institutions, but they do exist. And we're not sure if things will go back when COVID's over.
Okay, so I'm not quite sure. I'm going to try to read the question as is, and the person is anonymous, so I'm not sure who sent it. It says, so does physician scientists look at pharmaceutical drugs as well? Also, when you complete a biology degree, can you do biochemistry job fields?
So answer is yes. For the first one, many physician scientists work directly with pharmaceutical companies. And it's like they balance, because a lot of pharmaceutical companies work with physicians because they're trying to like sell the drugs, but you're also trying to find a drug that will work on patients, and physician scientists have access to the patients. So they actually have to work together. And many physician scientists are very well skilled in pharmacology and pharmaceuticals themselves. And the second question, can you repeat it again, please?
When you complete a biology degree, can you do biochemistry jobs?
Yes. Yes. So the cool thing about biology, biochemistry, they're very related. For example, like people who did a biology degree, they did food science jobs. And that's the cool thing about your program, is because your biology degree isn't just purely biology. Like you learn a little bit of chemistry, you learn a little bit of parasitology. And the idea is that, when you finish a bachelor's, nobody expects you to know everything. They just expect you to be able to learn something new. And once you can work and are able to learn something new, then once you show that to the interviewer, then you will be able to get that job, I think.
Right, and the final question, a lot of the jobs require a PhD. Is there a level before becoming an actual scientist? For instance, someone becomes a research fellow before becoming an actual researcher. Is it similar for bioinformatics?
Yes and no, it depends. If you go in the academic route, you have to become a research fellow before you become like a professor or a senior scientist in the academic world, right? If we go straight to industry, after you get your PhD, you don't have to do a fellowship. They can hire you straight on as a bioinformatics scientist. Okay. But your responsibilities are different. Like the fellow in academia, they're expected to do independent research by themselves, whereas the one in industry, they're expected to do it as part of a team, which means you don't have to be trained as a fellow to do independent work. You just need to be able to work with other people and leverage their expertise.
Okay. Well, that's it for our questions. Thank you, everyone, for submitting your questions. Thank you to all of the students. We still have 52 attendees, and we're very grateful. Thank you, Dr. Farrell, for your presentation again. And we're going to hand over to our next co-host, Mrs. Clarine McDavid Adams, for our next session that's going to begin shortly.
Thank you, everyone, for this opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Okay, so good evening to everyone. We just want to again thank Dr. Farrell for his presentation, and we're about to have Dr. Dave Cassie, who will be presenting to us at this point in time. Before we begin, we just want to pause and have a word of prayer as we get started for this particular track of the session. Father, we do thank you for your goodness, your mercy towards us. I pray that you would be with us as we're about to gain more information and knowledge, dear Father, and I ask that you would be with Dr. Cassie in a special way for Christ's sake. Amen.
All right, so just before we get into it, I would like to give you a little bit of information on Dr. Dave Cassie. He is currently an assistant professor of chemistry in the Department of Biological Sciences in the School of Sciences, Technology, and Allied Health, and also serves as vice president of the USC Faculty Senate 2020 to 2022. He is a former chair of the Department of Chemical and Physical Sciences and Examination Council of the USC, and is in his 13th year of employment with the institution. Prior to his stint at USC, he has had 15 years experience in the education sector of Trinidad and Tobago, where he has taught at both the public primary and secondary school levels. Dr. Cassie received his Doctor of Education degree in Educational Leadership in Higher Education from the University of the West Indies Open Campus. His doctoral work in use of virtual chemistry laboratory and online chemistry courses was featured in his presentation at the 20th International Council for Distance Education World Conference on Online Learning in Dublin, Ireland in November 2019. His presentation was entitled Finding Common Ground for Re-Imaging Online Chemistry Learning for Better Futures. More recently, in November 2021, Dr. Cassie was a recipient of the 2021 Labster Teacher of the Year STEM Excellence Award and presented, where his presentation highlighted the use of virtual simulations in science teaching and learning post-COVID-19. Dr. Cassie also holds a Master of Philosophy degree in inorganic chemistry, and a Bachelor of Science general degree, first class honors in chemistry from the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine. He has received a number of academic recognitions, including the President's Gold Medal for Top Student at Teachers College Examination 1998, a Government of Trinidad and Tobago National Scholarship, Dublin City University Learning Transformation Scholarship, and University of the West Indies Postgraduate Scholarship. He has also received interest in the environment, e-leadership, and public health. He recently gave an oral presentation on behalf of his fellow research colleagues on COVID-19 vaccine hesitancy in Trinidad and Tobago at the virtual 2021 Trinidad and Tobago National Health Conference. He has affiliations with the American Education Research Association, the Association of Pharmacy Professionals, and the American Chemical Society. In his spare time, Dr. Cassie enjoys hiking and other outdoors activities. He describes himself as a dedicated, enthusiastic, student-centered, Caribbean-based educational leader who is interested in providing educational leadership in higher education in a supportive 21st century technology-driven, research-focused, and academically stimulating environment. Today, Dr. Cassie will be speaking to us on exploring digital futures in science, skills, thrills, and challenges. I turn you over at this time to Dr. Dave Cassie.
All right, thank you very much, Claire. Pleasant good afternoon to everyone who stayed on with us for this session. So let me say I'm very happy to have this opportunity to share this presentation with my colleagues as well as the students of the School of Sciences, Technology, and Allied Health, and the other schools students from other schools who might have joined us as part of the extended USC community, and of course, those who are guests at this function. Before I continue as well, I must congratulate the interim dean as well as the faculty and students of the School of Business for this timely and very relevant forum to discuss this very important topic, the impact of digitalization on career choices. Now, it has already afforded us an opportunity to pause and to reflect on the future direction of digitalization within our school and as well as the entire university as a whole. So my focus this afternoon will be mainly from a science perspective as I share screen here with you. I hope you are up, right? So You should be seeing my screen here. So my focus here this afternoon is really from a science perspective to explore digital futures in science. The presentation will highlight for all of us the importance of digitalization in all that we do in science. I will take you on a journey that will bring you face to face with some cutting edge digital realities in science that is happening in the developing world, as well as the skills that you will need as we navigate through this new frontier. Now, at the same time, you will be wowed by some of the exciting things that are already taking place and that are already changing the face of the science landscape. And as well as I will try to outline some of the challenges that we here at USC are facing and will face, and that I could also put forward a roadmap as to how we can achieve further digital transformation. So before I embark on this journey with you, I think it's important that you're hearing a lot of catchphrases and terms, and I don't know if you've been sitting and listening on with the School of Business in this forum, their Business and Careers Week 2022, that you would have come across some terms that would have been highlighted. Yeah, you may have heard about digital transformation, digitization, digitalization, digital futures, digital skills, as well as digital footprint. So I want to get a kind of a feel as to how much you might know, at least for about the first three terms on the slide. So I'm going to just quickly share a Mentimeter presentation with you. And let me get a gauge as to how much you recall, or if you have an idea as to how these terms are used, and in terms of their complexity, pretty much how much you can actually rank them in terms of complexity. So I'm going to run across here to my Mentimeter, and I'm going to share the presentation. All right. So are you seeing my screen? And you have, of course, if you go to menti.com, you're going to use the code at the top. And I'd like you to rank the following terms in order from lowest to highest. You're using a scale of 1 to 3, where 1 is the lowest and 3 is the highest. And you're going to order your understanding of the complexity that is being described by these terms. So if you can do that, I'll give you a couple of minutes to start it. If you can, again, you're using the mentimeter.com as in your browser, and you're putting in the code 48050788 to participate and rank these terms for us, so we can get an idea as to, as a science student as well, how much do you know with regard to these terms in terms of their complexity from lowest to highest. So I'm not seeing anybody getting in yet. All right. So we have some responses. We have some responses going. Good. Okay. So we could get a couple more, just about 3 or 4 people more, if we can get them to participate. I think I have over 50 people. So, it'll be nice to get as much as persons on it to see how much you can rank these terms in order of complexity. All right, so we have 7. Let's see if we can get to 10. All right, we got to 10. Let's go for 20. At least if I get half, I'll be satisfied. So give me around 25 or so. We're at 11. All right, we're moving a little slowly, but again, these are terms that you may have come across during this Business Week, Business and Careers Week forum. And again, it's something that you need to be aware of, because as you would have heard from Dr. Farrell, bioinformatics actually is an application of one of these terms as a whole. So it's important to get a kind of feedback as to, all right, so as I said, let me try for 25. If I don't get 25, I'll be satisfied for 20. All right, I'm just gonna go for 4 more. All right, 2 more. So I had to bring down from 25 to 20. That's fine, that's okay. All right, 2 more persons to wrap up that question, and then we'll continue our chat. 1 more. Wonderful. So you all are absolutely correct. The lowest form of in terms of complexity is digitization, then digitalization, then digital transformation. So now I can come back to my slide. All right. So yes, you are absolutely correct in identifying, and as I like to say here, getting the definitions right and putting digital concepts in order, because when we digitize something, of course, we are transitioning it from analog to digital form. So if you take up paper records and you simply archive it and you digitize it and you archive it and you're able to retrieve it, that's a form of digitization. When it comes to digitalization, you are talking about here, it's using digital technologies and information to transform individual institutional operations. So for example, when you may have, if somebody's applying to USC now, they can do that entire process, that application process online. And that is an automated process in itself. And that's an example of digitalization. When we think about digital transformation, this is when we're looking at the whole and the complete broad picture, where it is the institution is saying to all within its, all its stakeholders, is that we are setting about to transform the strategic direction or the value proposition of this university. All right. It involves deep and coordinated shifts in culture, workforce, and technology. And of course, institutions likely need to have, they've gone through a significant amount of digitization and digitalization before we get to that point of digital transformation. And that's important for you to understand, because you have actually been a part of a digitalization process without probably realizing it. Now, the other terms that we had here were digital futures, and that's the idea that businesses will operate digitally in the future. And we can say the future is now because we've seen what has taken place with COVID-19. We are talking, when I had another term there, digital skills, it was really the use of digital devices to communication applications as well as networks to access and manage information. And those are some of the skills that you will actually, again, bioinformatics is an application of that, as you saw just now. And when somebody describes your digital footprint, they're talking about information about a particular person on the internet based on their online activities. So whether you visited LinkedIn, whether you visited Facebook and so on, all of that is a part of your digital footprint. Now, like I said, you've been a part of digitalization in USC if you were, again, as a student over the last 2 years. We have been using virtual science laboratory simulations. Again, it's by far a step along the digitalization process, because we're trying to as well augment the laboratory experience for students in schools. Not only in the school, of course. The use of virtual simulations has been actually rampant and worldwide. It has been spreading worldwide as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. So it really wasn't by accident or design. We just had to. Yes, and of course, here at USC, there has been a general acceptance for the use of virtual science simulations, right? And you all are familiar with the use of Labster with this. Now, again, as I want to reiterate, it is because of COVID-19 that there has been this drastic drive to get into digitalization. it could be that digitalization itself may have been slow or proceeding at a pace not in keeping with what is the norm out there here at USC. So as we move from the pandemic status to eventually the endemic status, we must recognize that the role and the impact of this type of digitalization has upon you as students, as well as the future it will shape. Because additionally, we need to chart the course for the full digital transformation of the School of Sciences, Technology, and Allied Health. And of course, as I said, USC as a whole. Now, at this point, I would like to just, I'm going to just share for the benefit of the people who may not have experienced the use of Labster. I'm just going to share maybe about a 5 minutes or so out of a recording we did previously at the Science Day on March 6th, where Ms. Brown from our Department of Biological Sciences actually just runs through a feature on osmosis, so that I want to give everybody an opportunity, at least if they have not had a chance to see what Labster is about. I'm just going to play about 5 minutes of that video so that you can get a sense of what a virtual simulation is about. And coming right after that, I'm going to show you an actual a future lab. And I'm not going to say much, but I'm going to say that it is going to amaze you to know the technology that is being used currently in terms of smart glasses and what a future lab could be about. So I just want to now quickly go to this video. And as I said, I'll just give you about 5 minutes of it, and I'm up to ensure that I share sound so you can hear, right? It's good. It's good and ready, set up to go.
Our simulation choice today is entitled Osmosis. Choose the right solution for an intravenous drip. This was selected because we know in secondary school, from forms 3, even 4 and 5, you would have been introduced to osmosis and what it is about. Now we have an opportunity to look at it from a practical standpoint. So let's get started.
Hi there. Welcome to Labster. We're at the hospital today where you will learn about diffusion and osmosis. You will need to use these processes to save Frank's life. This simulation uses voiceovers. If you don't have audio, click the speaker symbol on the top right of your lab pad to switch the play mode. If you disable the sound effects, the lab pad will slide up whenever there are instructions to read. You can select what type of audio you prefer. Deselecting any of the options will mute that option. Click Continue to learn how to navigate through your mission. Using the lab pad is an important way to get the most out of this simulation. Is this the first time you are playing a Labster simulation?
As we have already seen, we know exactly how Labster works. So let's continue.
Perfect. Then let's get started with your first mission. Click on Frank to learn about what happened to him.
Hi there. I stayed out in the sun too long and got very dehydrated. The doctor says I need a saline infusion, but I am not sure which bottle is the correct one. Do you have any questions?
Yes, Frank, I have a few questions. What exactly is saline?
Normal saline is a solution of water and 0.9% salt. It is similar to blood plasma and can therefore be used in an infusion. Using pure water or more salt could damage the cells in the blood. Do you have any questions?
Yes. Can you explain what a hypotonic solution is?
A hypotonic solution contains less solutes or dissolved molecules than another solution, in this case the blood. In other words, the hypotonic solution is more dilute than the blood. Do you have any questions?
What does hypertonic mean?
A hypertonic solution contains more solutes or dissolved molecules than another solution, in this case the blood. In other words, the hypertonic solution is more concentrated than the blood. Do you have any questions?
Yes, can you explain isotonic, please?
An isotonic solution contains the same amount of solutes or dissolved molecules as another solution, in this case the blood. Do you have any questions?
I think I'm good now, thank you. Let's continue.
Please take a look at the bottles in front of me and tell me what I should use for the infusion.
Hover over the bottles on the handcart and select the one that should be used for the infusion.
We have a hypotonic solution, an isotonic solution, and a hypertonic solution. Which one do you think we should use? Let's go with the hypotonic solution.
Let's not risk Frank's life. We better go to the lab first and learn about osmosis. Before we start, let's take a look at the difference between osmosis and another type of transport called diffusion. Click the Start Animation button on the left side of the screen. Which side of the container has more of the orange molecules at the end of the diffusion animation?
We have 4 options. Option A, the right side. Option B, all orange molecules are gone. Option C, the left side. And option D, both sides have the same number. Please insert your answers in the chat pod. Let's take a look again at the screen. Okay, now that we have a few answers.
Yeah, you could have as well added an answer.
Both sides have the same.
That's right. The molecules move spontaneously in the solution. If the concentration of molecules on one side of the container is higher than the other, more molecules will move from this more concentrated side of the solution towards the more dilute side than in the other direction.
Okay, so I'm just going to stop it there because as I said, I just wanted to give you a glimpse. Again, this might be a refresher for some people, as well as, for some people who have never seen inside a virtual laboratory simulation. This would be something very interesting. One of the questions I have for you is, for those of you who may have used it before, what is the name of the AI assistant? If you could write on the chat for me there, what is the name of the AI assistant that is present in Labster? I got some answers. I've got 1 answer. I've got 2 answers. I've got 3 answers. Yes, it is Dr. One. And when I say AI, what does that acronym mean? And if anybody can just quickly write that down in the chat box for us as well. When I speak of an AI, what am I speaking of? Right, artificial intelligence. Yes, so great. So I'm going to just come back now to my next slide, which, as I said, it's something to bear in mind when it comes to looking at, actually, I need to go to a YouTube video quickly. And in this video, I want you to recognize and see if you can compare the experience in a science virtual laboratory simulation with what really is happening in the real world when it comes to what we call the future labs. And in this clip, you're going to actually get a sense of what people are using here called smart glasses. And in these smart glasses, you're going to see some of the interesting features that you can actually do within a real lab. So now that I have said that to you, let me go quickly to find my my smart glasses presentation. So coming up now, just give me a sec here to share screen. All right. So take a look at this as you compare.
Confirm. Show me the recipe for Media Supplement 1342. Look at these containers. Confirm. Recipe completed. Confirm. Focus. Call Peter.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Peter.
How are you?
I'm fine, thanks.
So, how can I help you?
I have some troubles with my cells. They don't seem to grow properly. Could you please take a look at the microscopy pictures?
Sure. I will connect to your lab glasses.
Great. I will show you the culture.
From what I can see, the cells look great and viable. There's definitely no contamination.
That's great, but why is the growth so bad?
You should measure the glutamine concentration. It is quite possible that the starting concentration is too low.
Okay, that sounds plausible.
So try to increase the concentration and passage the cells in the new media.
Great. Thank you very much, Peter. Bye.
So from this case you can see that working with mammalian cell culture is always a bit of a difficult task. You have to take a look at all the media compounds and optimize it.
Okay, so that there pretty much summarizes, gives you a demo of smart glasses, which it pretty much would be a part, or is actually being used in terms of labs of the future. Now, yes, I think most people are impressed by it. But let me ask you this question to get you thinking. What are some of the things that were similar, do you think, in experience in a virtual science lab compared to what we saw there in that using the smart glasses in a real lab? Any ideas of similarities? You can just quickly, you can write on the chat what you think might be a similarity between both of them. The promise to wear gloves, yes. Yeah. that safety aspect, yes. They're both connected into the, yes, they're both connected to the internet, yes. Yes, being able to identify chemicals that you want to use. So my next question to you would be, do you think, or can you see then the value of using simulations, you know, in teaching, in science teaching, in comparing it to what is out in the real world? Nice. So it's good to understand that, because one of the things, let me just now come back to the presentation. Yes, we won't be too long again. I'm just getting into this one. These were some of the similarities. Oh, sorry, not this one.
Diffusion is the
I apologize. I am getting my slides mixed up. All right, here we go. Yeah. Yes.
spontaneous movement of particles.
Okay, I need to come out of that one, and this is what I want. Sorry. Right. So as some of you were indicating as well, there is similarity in the experience. So in a way, an exposure to virtual a science lab does prepare you for things that you would actually meet in the real world. Now, what I also, these are some of the comparisons of both of them. But what I also want to point out to you, and this was actually shared with you by Dr. Farrell, is the fact that the importance of learning skills. And the skills that we're talking about here is, in fact, if science itself is going to be transformed by digital technology, then of course we need to train scientists in to think differently, and of course to adapt to new technologies. And here we have a list of skills for future chemists, and by extension even scientists, that the Royal Society of Chemistry has proffered. And as was mentioned by Dr. Farrell, programming experience is important because you need to understand what programs can and cannot do. Hence the reason for later on some people might go on to actually do programming courses, and his involvement and his admonition to you to say, well, it's good to get involved in programming. Some statistics as well, and what is called machine learning, data science skills, as he pointed out to you all as well. Again, the ability to be adaptable, to use new and be open to use new technology. And of course, understanding data and being able to manipulate data, and therefore data literacy is important. Another key element, as Dr. Farrell was pointing out us to, is the fact that in the skills of the future, we can no longer remain separated to say, well, this is chemistry, this is biology, this is physics, and this is computer science, in these what we describe as silos. But the scientists of the future, or the scientists now, I would say, needs to be more interdisciplinary as well as multidisciplinary in order to collaborate across, again, it is across the world, across subject areas. And again, you saw that ability with the smart glasses as well. A very important quote as well from Elizabeth Rosell, who is a director at Johnson Matthey Technology Center, and they have centers across the UK as well. Technology will never get rid of the human being as a technical expert. It will absolutely enable efficiencies. So the idea here is that the human being, the scientist, is in charge of manipulating quite a lot, and they would still remain the technical expert. All right. Okay, so just to point out to you here, again, you could see some of the digital skills that will be needed, and that, of course, and going forward as educators, we're coming to that point where it is that the need for baseline computational, mathematical, and statistical competence, a deeper understanding and knowledge for people working in, as I said, in these multidisciplinary areas. And again, these are some of your skills that we're talking about: programming, machine learning, artificial intelligence, modeling and simulation, as well as robotics and automation. And I can tell you, within my experience as an analytical support specialist in the private sector, automation in terms of doing reactions, you could have actually had, you could run many, well, hundreds of samples, let's say through a mass spec or through a GC, which is a gas chromatography equipment. And now, of course, with automated technology, you can have hundreds of experiments being performed in one day. In actually preparing for this, I had a look at a video that also spoke about the fact that a PhD student, during their time as in their program, might actually do about maybe 700 experiments. But here now, with automation and robotics within the lab, you could actually have those done within one day or as much as one day, because again, these things can work 24/7. Okay. So these are the skills that you will need, and as you move into the future in science. So the challenges we can come to. So you've seen a little bit about the skills, you've seen the thrills. Here are the challenges that we face currently, not only in this part of not only the USC, but of course in this part of the world, is the fact that we need to understand that the disciplines can no longer remain in silos, that there is a need to revise the curriculum. There is a need for training in digital skills. And again, changing the mindset and the culture is important, because we can no longer do things the same way we did them 5, 10 years or even 2 years ago. There has to be an engagement between, when I say engagement, more exchange of information, knowledge, and skills with industry and academia. Yeah. And again, having leadership and advocacy for digital futures, because it is important to scan the horizon and see where we are and what we need to do. Now, what does that mean for the students coming into our programs? It has to mean now that we have to develop a more synergy between the areas of digital sciences, science disciplines, and technologies. So maybe if you come by in the next couple of years, you may find that the biology degree or the chemistry minor, or even there might be new possibilities of these types, improved degree programs, I would say, that add these types of digital skills to them, because that is where we could actually make an indentation within the futures that we predict. And that, as I'm saying, we say futures, but we can really see that they're here. So it's important to have digital skills in the school curriculum. And of course, our undergraduate courses would now need to resemble and incorporate these types of digital skills. In terms of researchers, and as again, I'm so glad that Dr. Farrell was able to come before me, because you would have seen more a practical sense of why all these skills are important. Because as a researcher and even science educators, it's important for us as well to be trained in digital skills. It's important as well for the roles of digital professionals and to be recognized and again attributed and given their rightful attribution. Again, the engagement among the science disciplines and industry for knowledge and skills transfer, because at some point, people can go off into industry, and having internships within industry that are actually practicing and using digital skills is where we need to go as well. And finally, the last point I'd like to make in terms of charting out a roadmap for the future of science in terms of skills that are needed and how it can be done. It's important, as I said, to look at the horizon and scan and identify research areas and capabilities where the digital skills will transform and as well have impacts in partnership with experts as well, with other sciences and technology fields. So in summary, what I've outlined for you here is the fact that at USC, at the School of Sciences, Technology, and Allied Health, you have experienced a form of, well, digitalization when it comes to the teaching of science. And I'm saying to you that as you, some of you who might be here and moving forward into the years ahead, we, again, depending on the times available, there might be curriculum changes that would come. And this would definitely see the incorporation of more digital skills, which would make you much more marketable and also prepare you for areas like bioinformatics. And again, if you are not in this, some of you might be graduating, it also means that those who come after you would definitely be able to experience this. So that is my case that I'm putting forward here. And I hope that you would have taken away something beneficial, and that you can see that, yes, the future is really now when it comes to digital skills in science. So I thank you for your time and your attention. And by the way, yes, these are some more references that I used to prepare this presentation. And if you have any questions, I'm sure Ms. Roberts would moderate. Oh, sorry, Mrs. Adams will let us know. Yes.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Cassie, for your presentation. I'm looking in the Q&A. I haven't seen any questions come in for you on your presentation. So I am going to assume that everyone was pretty crystal clear with what you were saying. I don't know if there are any stragglers that might want to quickly, okay, I think I see one. All right, so there's a question here. It says, since chemistry is generally a precise science, what's the margin of error acceptable when using the digital glasses? Since chemistry is generally a precise science, what's the margin of error acceptable when using the digital glasses?
Okay. Thank you for the question. I think that's Mrs. Baines. So thank you for the question, Mrs. Baines. Now, in terms of an actual margin of error, I am not able to say exactly. This is a commercially available product. So I guess when that product is being sold, there would be discussions as to errors of margin, etc. But the whole point of using a smart glasses is really, it makes things more efficient in the lab, as well as provide a connected database in terms of the equipment that you're using, as well as information that is readily available. And as you would recognize as well, there was very little use of paper, so that everything is digitally produced and stored.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's see. All right, so I don't see any other questions in the question and answer. So if we don't have any other questions, we again would like to thank you so much, Dr. Cassie, for your presentation, reminding us that we should be looking at exploring digital futures in science, looking at the skills, thrills, and challenges that are involved in that process. So thank you once again for your presentation.
You're welcome.
Okay, so at this point in time, I would turn back over to our chair, Dr. Camille Mitchell.
Good afternoon again, everyone. The pleasure is mine to present some tokens to our presenters. We have Dr. Farrell and Dr. Cassie, and I wish we were together in person that I could actually hand these presentations to you, but unfortunately, given the times in which we are currently, that is not possible. But I want you to imagine that we are together and I am handing a present token to you. It comes with all of our appreciation and thanks for first taking time out of your very busy schedules to do these presentations for us. And so on behalf of the students, the entire department, and indeed the school, I present you with these tokens. So I want you to use your imagination at this time and accept them. Are they accepted? Yes, they are accepted. Wonderful. So we will do the necessary afterwards. And yeah, so back to you, Mrs. McDavid Adams.
Okay, so At this point in time, we would like to close off with a word of prayer as we close our sessions for this science and digitization. So I will invite all of you to bow our heads
Sorry.
as we close off.
Sorry, Mrs.
Yes, go ahead.
David Adams. There's supposed to be a vote of thanks from Davidson Smith, and then
Okay, sure.
final word of prayer from Mr. Lawrence.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon to the presenters. To Dr. Alvin Farrell, as a fellow Vincentian, I'm extremely pleased. I'm extremely pleased to have this opportunity to thank you for taking the time out to broaden our perspective on the opportunities that are out there for many of us who would be a bit unsure as to which step we could take after completing our undergrad studies. And to be honest, I have definitely taken more than one thing of interest, and I've already started Googling as we speak. To Dr. Cassie, thank you for your very interactive presentation pertaining to exploring digital futures within the science field. I'm very sure that you would have excited the minds of some of the future scientists that we have here, and awoken many of the person's interests in being a part of the digitally scientific future, which we can all agree is now. To our facilitators, Dr. Bullard Roberts and Mrs. McDavid Adams, thank you for making this entire program very smooth and for effectively being the voice of the attendees this afternoon. Thank you to our chair, Dr. Mitchell, for her well wishes ahead of the presentations, as well as other lecturers and all other persons who would have contributed to the proceedings this afternoon. And thank you to the students and all other attendees for being here, and to the School of Business for the conducting of this business week. And thank you once again, and we can continue with the proceedings.
Okay, so we invite Mr. Lawrence, Dwayne Lawrence, to do the closing prayer for us.
Okay, everyone, let's bow our heads for prayer. Heavenly Father, Lord, we are so grateful to you for the blessings of this afternoon. Thank you so much, Lord, for using our presenters, Dr. Farrell and Dr. Cassie, to deliver such interesting and informative presentations. I pray, Lord, that you will bless our students in a special way as they seek to prepare for a future that is going to involve a lot more interaction in a digital space. And I pray, Lord, that you will continue to guide them in their preparation. I also pray, Lord, that you will continue to bless our ongoing business and career week. I pray for continued success. Thank you so much once again for everything. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.